Hey everyone. All right, we're going to talk about factoring quadratic expressions, so trinomials. We're going to factor the trinomials where our leading coefficient has it's equal to 1. Okay, so we're going to do this when it's equal to 1, and we're going to do this when it's not equal to 1. So the general forms that you have for this, so you have your 3 terms because they are trinomials. So the first form is ax squared plus bx plus c. So when you break it down to your 2 binomials, you'll have 2 plus signs breaking up your terms. Okay. So the second form that we usually have, we have ax squared minus bx plus c. And what this gives us is 2 subtractions. So 2 binomials where we have subtraction. And then we have our third and fourth ones. They're very similar. So ax squared plus bx minus c. When we have this, we have a plus and minus. When you do your multiplication, your bigger number is positive. And we'll talk about why that is when we get to an example, okay? So for 4, we have ax squared minus bx minus c, and that again gives us a plus and a minus. And here, your bigger number needs to be negative, okay? So my expectation is that you memorize this, okay? It's extremely helpful if you do memorize it. It makes this process quicker, so you need to make sure that you memorize how this breaks down. So we're going to do some examples so I can show you exactly what this looks like. So when we factor trinomials, looking at example 1, you can see our leading coefficient is 1 here, 1x squared plus 8x plus 15, okay? So when we factor, we are always going to have 2 groups of binomials, okay? Our goal is to multiply to 15, and we're going to add to 8x, okay? So to do that, we really only take a look at the first term and the last term here. So the first term, because we've talked about with binomials, it's double distribution, or it's the smiley face, or it's FOIL. When we do this part right here, that first eyebrow or first term or double distribution, that first term, something times something needs to equal x squared. So the only thing that I know that will give me x squared is when you have x times x. Okay, so x times x here. Okay, so x times x gives me x squared. All right, so then I want to look at what do I need to put here in my binomial. So my last term, my eyebrow, last term, double distribution, what times what gives me 15? Okay, so there are 2 things. You have 1 and 15, and you have 3 and 5. Okay, so this is where our signs come into play. So the signs of the trinomial will help you figure out what factors to use. So since we have 2 positives, okay, we have 2 pluses here, I know from the shortcut I gave you that I'm going to have a plus sign in the first one and a plus sign in the second one. Okay, so I need to choose something that will multiply to 15, but will help me add to 8x. And the adding part comes from the double distribution that comes from underneath, and I'm going to show you that. Okay, so I'm just going to guess. I'm going to say let's choose 1 and let's choose 15. Okay, so when I do my distributing and my foiling, I get x squared plus 15, so good, good so far, 1x plus 15x. So when I go to simplify, I should end up with my original trinomial. Well, I end up with a 16x and not an 8x, so I chose wrong, okay? I shouldn't have chosen my 1 and 15, okay? So I need to check my other one. So I'm going to erase what I put in here, okay? I'm going to cross out this because that's wrong, okay? And I'm going to try again. I'm going to put my 3 and my 5 here. So, okay, so I'm going to try one more time. So I have x squared plus 3 times 5, which is 15. Again, good so far. Plus 3x plus 5x. So in standard form, we should end up with what we started with, the 8x squared plus 8, or x squared plus 8x plus 15, which I do. Okay, so this is going to take some skill and some practice, but you will get there. And so if you notice, what gives me my middle term are these two lines underneath, what I always call the nose and the smiley face, the O and the I from FOIL, the O and the I right there, okay? That will always give you your middle term, okay? That gives you your middle term. So if you're just trying to create your middle term, you need to take a look at what that sum or difference is going to be, because you know x times x is going to give you x squared. That's a given. You know that 3 times 5 or 1 times 15 will give you 15, because these are all factors of 15. So they're always going to multiply to that number. What you want to look for are these two lines underneath, because that gives you this middle term that can be very different for each problem. Okay, so let's do another one. On example 2. So example 2, we have x squared plus 4x minus 32. And as I told you, we're always going to have our groupings like this. Okay, so now I know my coefficient out front is 1. Okay, so I know if I need x squared, I know x times x will always give me x squared. Okay, x times itself, so that first little line that we draw, so that's always a given. So then I have 32, okay, and we can look at factor pairs of 32. 1 times 32, 2 times 16, 4 times 8. So we have these factor pairings of 32. So when we do our last eyebrow right here, no matter what we put there, it will equal 32. Now, what we need to be concerned about is what will give us this 4x, okay? And that's where our signs come in. So if we look at our signs from our table, we have a trinomial that's a plus minus, which means I'm going to have a plus minus in my answer. Okay, so plus minus. And with that, I need to make sure my bigger number is positive. So this is a good example to show what I mean here. So I need this underneath here, this nose or inner, or this mouth or outer, to add up to whatever it is. I need it to add up to 4x. Okay, so my suggestion is to start somewhere in this range with the 2 and 16, or the 4 and the 8. So keep in mind, whatever factors we choose, the bigger one has to be positive because our middle term is positive. Okay, so I'm going to start with 8 and 4. Okay, so I'm going to put my 8 first because that's where my plus sign is, and my 4 second because that's where the other space is for that. So again, I know that this multiplication right here, the last terms multiplying together, the eyebrow, 8 times 4 will give me 32. What I'm concerned with is this underneath highlighted part, okay? So now I have 8x minus 4x, and I'm hoping that that gives me a middle term of 4, a positive 4x, which it does. So that means if I did all this FOILing again, so I'm going to erase this and do all my lines. So that means if I did x times x, which is x squared, 8 times negative 4 gives me a negative 32. Good so far. The nose, or the inner, is my 8x, and then I have my minus 4x. So then in standard form, this should be x squared plus 4x minus 32, and it should be exactly what I started with, which means when I chose my factors over to the right here, my 4 and 8, that means I did a good job of choosing. Okay, so you're going to learn little hints and tricks, of how to get this started and where to start, and where to kind of do your guessing and checking from. Okay, so because we chose our bigger number to be positive here, because my helpful hint up here that I wrote down, I was able to get the correct answer early. Now, if I did not, so let's look at if I did not choose correctly. Okay, so let me erase all this. If I did not choose correctly and I put the 4 in front with the positive and the 8 with the negative, that means when I do my nose and my mouth here, my inner and outer lines, I have 4x minus 8x, which gives me a negative 4, which means when I do the rest of my FOIL, I end up with x squared minus 4x minus 32. That's not what I want, because that has to be positive in the original problem. Okay, so make sure you understand the order matters here. So make sure you're choosing the right numbers for our problem. And in this case, the numbers need to be positive 8 and negative 4. Okay, so let's go to the next page and take a look at another example. I want to do example 4, okay, because it's a little different than what we've done. So for example 4, we have x squared minus x minus 12. So again, I know because it's a trinomial, I'm going to be using my two binomials to break it apart. And then I also know, because my first term is just x squared, it's a 1x squared, that my first term in my binomials are going to be x times x. Because remember, we said x squared is x times itself. Okay. So then what I really need to focus on is this last term, this 12. Okay, so 12, my factor pairs that I can have are 1 times 12, I can have 2 times 6, and I can have 3 times 4. Okay, so I need to take a look at the signs for this trinomial. So in the box that we wrote stuff down, when I have a minus minus, okay, when I have a minus minus, like I do in this number 4, my number 4 option, I have a plus minus right here, and my bigger number needs to be negative. Okay, so I have to keep in mind that whatever factor pair I choose, the bigger number that goes there needs to be negative, because I have a middle term that is also negative. Okay. So again, my helpful hint is to start in this lower area of your factor pairs. So I would start with 2, 6, or 3, 4. Okay, keeping in mind here that my bigger number, my bigger factor, needs to be negative, so that my middle term is now negative. So if I choose 3, 4 to start with, my 3 should go first because it's with the plus, and my 4 should go last because it's with the minus. It's the bigger number. So then when I do my FOIL, double distribution, or smiley face to check it, okay, x squared, 3 times 4 is negative 12. And then my underneath, I get 3x, and then I get a minus 4x. And in standard form, that gives me x squared minus 4x minus 12, which is what I started with. Okay, it takes an extra 2 seconds to check that. So make sure you're checking your work and make sure you chose correctly, Because if you didn't choose correctly, you'd get something completely different. I lied. I added wrong. This should be a minus. You guys are probably like, no, Miss Conine, that's wrong. 3 plus -4 is -1. So this is correct now. Okay. So hopefully you fixed that and that's not too confusing. So I want to do another type. So I want to go down here to number 6. Okay, I have y squared minus 6y plus 8. I know it's a trinomial, so I'm going to do my best to put them in the binomials we start with. I also know that even though this is not an x squared, it's a y squared. Y squared, the only way you can get it is if it's y times y. Okay, that's the only way you can get that. So I know I'm going to have a y in my first term and a y in my first term for the second one. So now I want to take a look at my signs because that's going to help me out a lot here. I have a negative and a positive. So if you look at the very front page of this section, when you have a negative and a positive, that's option 2 here. And that means I have 2 negatives when I'm done. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. These little shortcuts are going to save you a lot of time. Okay, so minus, minus. So now the only thing I'm concerned with is what multiplies to get positive 8, but adds to negative 6. So I have 8. Looking at my factor pairs, I have 1 times 8 and 2 times 4. Okay, so when I start this, I really only have 2 to choose from. I'm going to go ahead and choose 2 and 4 because those are my smallest pair. I'm picking up on some of these little hints and little practice helpful strategies. I'm going to do 2 and 4. So then when I do my check, I have y times y, which is y squared. -2 times -4 gives me a positive 8. -2 times y is -2y, and -4 times y is -4y. So then these two are my like terms. So now in standard form, I should have y squared minus 6y plus 8, which is exactly what I started with. Okay, which means that this is the correct answer and it's in the correct order. Okay. So as we do this, you're going to pick up on helpful hints and you're going to pick up on where the signs are going to go, but you have to make the effort to memorize that information as well. So those are the 4 things that we have talked about. Okay, so those are the 4 methods. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there and then we can do more practice together. All right, have a good day.